let's bring in Peter Kirkham, a former detective at the Metropolitan Police. Hello, Peter.
Good afternoon.
In terms of the investigation now, which will, of course, continue, I don't know if you can picture in your mind that picture of the river disappearing towards the horizon, and there's a police tent right at the far side of the picture, if you like.
Yep.
Why would they have pitched that tent there? Might that be a site where they speculate she might have gone into the water? Is there any significance in the geography of that police tent?
I think that's unlikely. It's possible, but I think it's far more likely that it's where they're going to deal with Gaynor after she's brought out of the water. They won't do it in the open air, so they'll have a tent or similar somewhere, and so near the river would be a good place for that. Obviously, your correspondent will know whether or not that has been used for that reason. If not, it could be for any reason. I wouldn't like to say.
Okay.
One imagines these sorts of search operations are incredibly difficult when you're dealing with nature, when you're dealing with moving currents of water, and especially in the middle of winter, when it's dark, when it's cold, and there are only so many resources and man-hours in which people can expend on these things. And also one assumes a window of time before there's a risk actually that the body could have been conveyed much further downriver. I mean, this to me seems to have been conducted quite efficiently and quite quickly compared to what we saw with the hunt for Nicola Bulley.
I'm not sure I'd agree with the criticism of the hunt in the Lancashire case. There were criticisms and there have been acknowledged failings in relation to the supply of information to the media about her vulnerabilities. But the search itself, I didn't see anything particularly amiss with that. Yes, it took longer, but these things sometimes do. Somewhere between a week and 2 weeks is a reasonable time for someone to be found if they've gone into the water. You're right, it's cold, it's dark. It's a short window every day for the search teams to operate. You don't want to be doing it in the dark. Or if you do, you need to be checking it out in the day as well. As I say, cold and wet, that makes it uncomfortable. But in relation to how bodies of water flow and of how things that are in those bodies of water move, there's quite a lot of research been done over the years in relation to that. At one point, the Metropolitan Police, I think, were putting bodies of dead pigs in the River Thames just to have something of similar weight and similar physical characteristics. And see where they turned up. So it's an inexact science, but there's some science in there, and so that informs the search. So it's not quite as random as you might think.
In terms of water, obviously this body's been found in the water. The body will presumably take some kind of pretty pivotal role in the investigation. You learn a lot from a dead body, or the police do. But if it's been in the water for a week, presumably the evidence-seeking process becomes that much more difficult because presumably there'll be some decomposition, plus the water itself must wipe away evidence. That does present difficulties, am I right there?
It does. That said, a week isn't a huge length of time for a body to be in the water, so the damage to the state of the body is likely to be less than you might think. It probably won't obscure any physical injuries. They're still visible to a Home Office pathologist, even in the worst cases of decomposition. And so I suspect they'll be sure that there is or there is not any evidence of any physical assault or any physical injury. Obviously things like toxicology and stuff like that are still going to be possible on the contents of various organs within the body, and so one way or another they'll be able to get most of the information But as you say, it's not perfect, and some potential evidence will certainly be missing.
If the police do rule that nobody else was involved in this, how much further do they then need to go to establish what actually happened? The one person who would be able to give answers is, of course, the person who is the one who's gone missing. It must be very difficult, therefore, to establish whether something is an accident or whether something was done deliberately and what the motivation was and if anybody else was connected.
Yeah, very much. And it's not just in cases where people end up in rivers, people falling off tall buildings or any number of other circumstances. That did they fall or did they jump or were they pushed sort of scenario comes to mind and is something that the police will look at and see if they can establish anything. But quite often it comes down to nobody's sure that something actually happened, that things took place in this particular way, but they can say there's not any evidence at all to support the alternative suggestions, and then in the absence of any evidence to suggest alternatives, a conclusion will be reached frequently, even though there's not actual proof beyond doubt of what happened. A conclusion will be reached of what the circumstances were. That will be put into the report to the coroner. The coroner will test that with evidence given, if they wish, to call the witnesses, the police officers or whatever, that have put that together at the inquest. And the coroner will make a decision as to exactly what has happened. But it's not unusual in such cases for there to be an open verdict, for instance. And basically they say, well, we don't think it's homicide. We don't think it's a range of other things. It could be accidents. It could be taking own life. It could be, 3 or 4 different reasons why someone has got into the river under their own steam, as it were. But they don't know for sure. And so it's a professional judgment, really, having looked at all the evidence they have to hand.